My stepmom claimed she was the executor. Then the real will said, under no circumstances her. The judge looked down at the thick folder in front of him, glasses perched low on his nose, and said flatly, in accordance with the documents presented, I hereby recognize Corrine Mallory as the executor of the estate of John V. Harper. The courtroom was dead silent. My ears rang. I blinked. I couldn't breathe. The only thing I could see, burned into my retinas, was that one sentence, bold and centered, in the middle of the real will I had read only days before. Under no circumstances is Corrine Mallory to serve as executor or beneficiary of any kind. My stepmother didn't turn toward me. She just smirked and adjusted her pearl necklace. Her lawyer nodded smugly. A few of my dad's distant cousins shifted in their seats, visibly uncomfortable. But no one said a word, not even me, because I was frozen, not with shock but with rage. The fake will she submitted was dated a month before the real one. Somehow, she had forged or manipulated something well enough to confuse the court. My lawyer sat next to me, flipping through her notes, whispering, "We'll appeal this. We'll fight. We're not done." But it sounded far away, like someone calling from the bottom of a well. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I wanted to scream. But instead, I remembered the day Dad first brought Corrine home. She was elegant, cool. Her lipstick never smudged. She never raised her voice, never let her smile drop. Even when I was clearly being cold to her, she was beautiful in that practiced, curated way that made her seem untouchable. I was 16. I didn't like her, but I didn't know why yet. Not then. Now I knew. She was a snake. A social climber. A woman who married my dad less than 6 months after her own third divorce, and 2 months after meeting him. Dad thought she was the second chance he never deserved. She made him feel young. She made him laugh. But she also slowly, methodically, began cutting him off from people, starting with me. After their wedding, I was asked to give them space. The guest room I had always stayed in suddenly became Corrine's art room. Calls went unanswered. Invitations were vague or last minute. And when I pushed, Dad would just sigh and say, "She's trying, honey. You've got to try too." I did try, but every time I came over there was a subtle shift. Photos of us, me and Dad, disappeared from the mantle. His old things, his favorite armchair, his quirky collectibles from travel, replaced by minimalist decor and abstract paintings I knew he didn't even like. Dad had always been colorful and cluttered. Their house became cold, gray, silent. The last real conversation I had with him was 4 months before he died. He sounded tired. "She's been pushing me to change my will," he said quietly. "Says it's too complicated, too outdated. Wants to streamline everything." I remember asking him, "Did you?" He paused. "I made a new one, yes, but I made it with someone else. Someone I trust, not the guy she recommended. I left a video too, in case she tries anything." That moment clung to me like a shadow after he passed. When I arrived at the house the day after the funeral, Corrine was already redecorating. I'm not exaggerating. A moving truck was out front. Men were loading Dad's antique desk, one I'd loved since I was a kid, into the back. I demanded to know what she was doing. She didn't even flinch. "John left everything to me," she said with a tired smile, as if she were bored of having to explain herself. "He trusted me to take care of his legacy. You'll understand when you're older." I nearly slapped her, but I didn't. I turned around and walked straight to my car. That was the moment I knew something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. I spent the next week calling every lawyer Dad had ever mentioned, every colleague, every friend. It took digging, but I found a name, Gregory Madsen, someone who wasn't listed on any of Dad's official paperwork that Corrine had access to. He was semi-retired and worked out of a home office in a town an hour away. When I showed up at his door, I expected a fight. Instead, he said, "I was wondering when you'd come." He handed me a thick folder, sealed, signed, dated. "This is the last will your father drafted." He was adamant about 2 things, that you be protected and that Corrine never see a cent. He feared she'd try something if he got worse too quickly. Inside the folder was also a USB drive. I opened it that night in my apartment, hands shaking, stomach in knots. It was a video. My father sat in his study, his real one, not Corrine's empty version of it, wearing a sweater I remembered from a family trip to Vermont. "If you're watching this," he said, looking straight into the camera, "then Corrine did what I always feared she might. I want to be clear. She is not to touch my estate, my collections, my daughter's inheritance. I have documented her attempts to manipulate me. I hope none of this is necessary, but just in case. Eliza, fight her." I did. And now, sitting in court with that memory playing on repeat in my brain, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I had the real will. I had the video. I had evidence. And I had every intention of tearing down every lie she'd built around my father's name. But to do that, I had to outthink her. outlawyer her, outlast her. And if I knew anything about Corinne Mallory, it was this. She'd rather burn everything to the ground than admit she'd lost. My attorney, Claire, was already filing motions before we'd even left the courtroom. She was a bulldog in heels, sharp, fast, and utterly merciless when cornered. Temporary executor doesn't mean permanent, she said, slamming her laptop shut in the backseat of the Uber. She won today. That doesn't mean she'll win in the end. But it felt like a loss. A loud, public, humiliating loss. Corinne had walked out of that courtroom as if she were the grieving widow instead of a calculating vulture. Cameras were outside too. Local press, mostly. She put on a show, dabbed fake tears, talked about respecting John's legacy, while I stood 10 feet away, feeling like a ghost at my own father's funeral. Again, I didn't go home that night. I drove to my dad's old fishing cabin upstate, the one Corinne always hated. It smelled like cedar and dust and old leather. His flannels were still in the closet. A bottle of aged scotch sat unopened on the shelf. I poured a glass and sat in the armchair by the window, letting the silence wrap around me. That night, I watched the video again. If Corinne has found a way to insert herself, my father said on screen, I want you to know you don't owe her civility. Don't let her bully you into silence. I've documented everything. And there's more. That sentence struck me like a hammer to the chest. There's more. I didn't know what he meant. I called Gregory the next morning. He answered on the second ring. I figured you'd call, he said. There's a box. I didn't include it the first time because, well, John was clear. Only if she pulled something. I was back at his place by noon. He handed me a small, locked metal case. Inside were 3 items. A notebook filled with my father's handwriting, a second USB drive labeled audio files, and a small stack of printed emails. The notebook was a journal of sorts, dated entries, observations, patterns. Corinne asked me again about my life insurance. Third time this week, Corinne said Eliza was becoming spoiled, suggested I reduce her trust fund. Corinne scheduled a meeting with another lawyer behind my back. Canceled it when I found out. The emails were worse. They were messages she'd sent to a friend, someone she clearly didn't think would betray her. In them, she joked about waiting out the clock and finally getting something for dealing with an old man's moods. There it was. Proof. This wasn't about grief. It wasn't even about inheritance. This was about control and greed. She hadn't loved my dad. She'd tolerated him, manipulated him, and now she was trying to erase me from his memory completely. Claire and I met the next day in her office. This changes everything, she said, scanning the emails. We file an injunction. Immediate. Emergency hearing. If a judge sees this, especially alongside the video and the second will, it could void her appointment entirely. But what if she hides the assets before then? I asked. What if she sells things, destroys things? Claire looked up. We'll ask for a freeze. On everything. Bank accounts, property transfers. If she so much as tries to move a paperclip, it'll be contempt of court. It moved fast after that. The judge reviewing our injunction was younger, sharper, and clearly annoyed that the earlier ruling had been made without all the information. He granted a freeze pending a full review. Corinne, of course, lost her mind. She called me. At 11:47 p.m., I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was venom. How dare you drag this through court? Your father trusted me. I took care of him. You? You were never around. And now you're trying to steal everything? He pitied you. That's why he left you anything. Don't think this will end well for you, Eliza. I sent the voicemail to Claire. She just nodded and added it to the file. What Corinne didn't know, what made her so dangerous, was that she still thought this was about money. She thought I wanted the house, or the car, or the antiques. But I didn't. I wanted the truth, and she was terrified of it. Over the next week, we gathered more. Old neighbors sent me security footage of Corinne screaming at my father on the porch. A former housekeeper emailed me with details about secret meetings and locked drawers. One of my dad's friends, a financial advisor, came forward and said Corinne had once tried to pressure him into giving her access to one of Dad's private accounts while he was in the hospital. Every thread I pulled led to more rot. And still, she kept pretending nothing was wrong. She hosted a dinner party in her house, gave a puff-piece interview to a local lifestyle magazine. I just miss him so much, she said, holding a photo she'd taken of herself next to one of his portraits. It made me physically ill. When the emergency hearing date came, she walked in like a queen entering a room she owned. She wore black. Again, still in mourning, apparently. Her lawyer tried to argue procedural errors, chain of custody doubts, jurisdiction issues. But the judge was having none of it. Claire laid it out in calm, brutal detail. The real will, the journal, the emails, the voicemail, the video. And when the court officer set up the laptop and played the footage of my father speaking directly to the camera, something cracked. Not in the room, in Karina. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes darted. Her hands shook. She looked at me across the courtroom, and for the first time, I saw fear. Karine didn't speak for the rest of that hearing. Her lawyer kept whispering furiously to her, but she just sat there, her perfectly manicured hands twisting in her lap, lips pressed so tightly they turned white. I kept waiting for her to explode, scream, deny, accuse, but she didn't. She just sat there, a marble statue cracking from the inside out. The judge ordered a full probate reevaluation and appointed a temporary neutral executor while the dispute was resolved. All of Karine's control was revoked, immediately. Every asset frozen, every document under review. Outside the courthouse, the press was waiting again. This time it was different. I didn't speak to them, but Claire did. "We're letting the evidence speak for itself," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Our goal is simple: to ensure Mr. Harper's actual documented wishes are honored, and to protect his estate from further misrepresentation." Karine stormed past the reporters like a wounded celebrity caught in a scandal. I caught a glimpse of her face, twisted, brittle, undone, and I realized then she wasn't used to losing. Not in court, not in life, not when she'd carefully built every moment of her persona around being untouchable. That night, I went back to the cabin, my father's cabin. I lit the fireplace and curled up in his old blanket. I held the journal he'd left and read through it again, page by page. There were so many entries, dates and little notations, some angry, some resigned, but one page, near the end, caught me. It simply read, "If she ever tries to erase Eliza, then everything I feared is true." I broke down crying. Because that's what this was. Not just theft, not just lies, it was erasure. She had tried to erase me, as if I had no right to be his daughter, as if I was an inconvenience in her perfect image of widowhood and wealth. But I was done grieving. I was done being quiet. The next phase came quickly. The neutral executor, a woman named Janet Porter, was thorough and brutally efficient. She combed through every file, every account, every piece of documentation Karine had submitted, and what she found made my blood run cold. There were forged signatures, backdated letters, lost emails, conveniently omitting crucial changes to beneficiaries, and bank transfers, small at first, but growing bolder in the weeks leading up to my dad's death. Funds moved quietly into a separate shell account Karine had opened in her cousin's name. A cousin who, as it turned out, hadn't spoken to her in years and was shocked to learn his identity had been used at all. Janet referred it to the DA. And just like that, this stopped being probate court and became a criminal investigation. Karine's mask shattered. She tried to pivot, claimed my father had dementia, that the new will was fabricated, that the video was deep-faked. Her lawyer, to his credit, looked like he wanted to disappear into his own briefcase. But the evidence was overwhelming. My father had video footage and timestamps. He'd emailed confirmations, left notarized signatures with a separate, trusted office. He had been prepared. He had known this might happen. And he'd protected me the only way he knew how, with truth, documented in every way he could think of. The DA's office opened a formal inquiry into fraud, estate manipulation, and attempted embezzlement. Karine was served. That was the last time she tried to contact me directly. One afternoon, about a week after the investigation went public, I received a letter, handwritten. The envelope didn't have a return address, but I knew who it was from the moment I saw the looping cursive. Inside were 2 sentences. "You have no idea what your father was really like, but you will. When they dig deeper, don't say I didn't warn you." It was classic Karine. Elegant threat wrapped in feigned insight. One last twist of the knife, but it didn't shake me. If anything, it clarified everything. She wasn't afraid of going to jail. She was afraid of being irrelevant, of being erased, which, ironically, is exactly what she had tried to do to me. Over the next month, the media picked it up. A local journalist contacted me for an interview. I agreed, not because I wanted to be in the spotlight, but because I wanted to tell the truth. I brought them the journal, the video, the emails, the full story. The article went viral. Stepdaughter fights back. Inside the battle over a millionaire's true legacy, people reached out from all over the country. Strangers, survivors, even other stepchildren who had been pushed aside in similar ways. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than grief or rage. I felt seen. I felt like I had honored my father. Not just by winning, but by telling the truth he tried so hard to preserve. One morning, Claire called me with an update. "They've offered her a plea," she said. "Restitution, full confession, and no contest to the fraud charges in exchange for avoiding prison. Will she take it?" "She already has." I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It was over. Almost. Kareen's confession wasn't public, but I gotta read it. Part of the settlement required her to sign a written account of her actions, under penalty of perjury, to accompany the restitution agreement. It was 10 pages long, most of it written in that same elegant script I remembered from birthday cards she used to sign as Best Kareen. But this time, there was no warmth, just cold, transactional honesty. She admitted to switching the will, said she found the original while going through my father's things, months before he died, and panicked. She said, I had invested 6 years of my life into this marriage. I refused to leave it empty-handed. She confessed to forging the earlier document using samples of his handwriting. She listed all the items she sold, moved or planned to repurpose, including the house, the savings, even my father's vintage watch collection. The worst part? She wasn't sorry. Not once in those 10 pages did she use the word regret. She wrote it like a business memo. A failure in logistics, not morality. The only thing she regretted was misjudging the daughter's persistence. The daughter, like I was just another obstacle in a spreadsheet. Claire handed me a printed copy in a manila folder. Do you want to keep it? She asked. I shook my head. I never wanted to read her voice again. The court finalized everything within 2 weeks. My father's estate was officially restored to the correct will. His belongings, or what remained, were accounted for and returned to the estate. Some things were gone forever, sold online, gifted to people who now refused to return them, or simply disappeared. But I got the important things back. Not the most expensive ones, not even the ones she probably thought I'd care about. The things that mattered. His journals, his sketchbooks, his first edition books with his notes in the margins, the framed photo of us at the Grand Canyon, the old navy blue sweater that still smelled like his aftershave. Those were mine again. Kareen vanished from public life. No one heard from her again. Last I checked, she'd moved out of state, changed her name, and was allegedly working for a small event planning company somewhere in Arizona. I didn't care. I had no interest in chasing her down or dragging her name further. I had won, not just the legal case, but the moral one. But there was still one thing left. My father's letter. Janet, the executor, found it wedged in a hidden drawer in the antique desk Kareen had tried to sell. It was in a plain envelope, addressed in my father's handwriting. Eliza, if she ever tries to steal this. I opened it on a rainy Tuesday morning. No ceremony, no fanfare. Just me, alone in his study, sitting where he once sat. His words were calm, measured, loving. If you're reading this, Eliza, then Kareen did what I feared she might. And I'm sorry. I never wanted this burden to fall on you, but I knew you were the only one who would fight for what's right. Not for the things, but for the truth. I wasn't perfect. I let someone into our lives who didn't deserve to be there. That's on me. But I hope you know, none of this changes how proud I am of you. You are everything I could have hoped to leave behind. Smart, fierce, kind. You're the legacy I care about. I read that line over and over. You're the legacy I care about. That was the moment the grief came back. Not in sharp, unbearable stabs like before, but in slow, steady waves. I cried for hours. For him. For everything we'd lost. For the years she'd stolen from us. The memories she'd tried to rewrite. But I also cried for something else. Relief? Because it was done now. Later that week, I visited his grave. For the first time since the funeral, I brought flowers. Not roses. He hated roses. I brought sunflowers like the ones he used to grow in the backyard. I sat on the grass for a long time and read him the letter aloud. When I finished, I said quietly, I did it, Dad. I made it right. And for the first time in months, the silence felt peaceful, not empty. After that, I started to rebuild. I quit my job, not out of recklessness, but clarity. I'd been working in a field I didn't care about, chasing promotions that meant nothing. I went back to school, applied for a program in legal advocacy, estate protection, to be specific. I knew how many people got steamrolled in cases like mine. People without lawyers, without money, without a voice. I wanted to help them fight. Claire wrote me a recommendation letter. You have more courtroom experience than half the interns I've ever had, she joked. And just like that, something good began to grow out of all the wreckage. Not fast, not loud, but real. 2 years have passed since the final court date. Sometimes, it still hits me in strange ways. I'll be walking through a bookstore and catch a glimpse of a title my dad once underlined in his journal. Or I'll hear a Sinatra song playing through cafe speakers and feel a rush of warmth and sadness all at once. Grief is like that. It doesn't vanish. It just stops screaming. I graduated with my certification in estate law advocacy last month. During the ceremony, Claire showed up unannounced. She handed me a small silver pen engraved with, "For the one who didn't back down." I keep it on my desk. I work now for a nonprofit that helps families navigate contested wills, especially those involving elder abuse or fraudulent manipulation. And almost every time I sit with a new client, confused, scared, emotionally drained, I recognize pieces of myself in them, and I tell them what Claire once told me. It's not about the stuff. It's about the truth. Let's protect it. One case that stuck with me recently involved a woman whose stepbrother tried to cut her out of her mother's estate using a doctored will. She felt powerless. I helped her fight back and win. Afterward, she sent me a note. Thank you for believing me when I didn't believe myself. I hung it on my wall. Kareen's name never comes up anymore, except in archived legal records and the occasional nosy message from someone who read the article. I don't answer those. She's a ghost now. No longer dangerous, just a shadow behind me. One afternoon, while cleaning the cabin, I found a box tucked high in the closet rafters. I almost didn't notice it. Inside were old photos. Real ones. Not the curated gallery that Kareen had staged in their house. These were messy, candid, full of movement and laughter. My dad and I in the backyard, covered in mud from planting sunflowers. Him asleep on the couch with a book open on his chest, and our dog curled against his legs. Me in braces and a terrible haircut, holding up a trophy while he grinned behind me. Buried at the bottom of the box was a folded piece of paper, a list, my name at the top. Things to leave for Eliza, if I forget to say them. The green sweater from Vermont, the fountain pen from my graduation, my Beatles records, the photo of her first piano recital, everything she ever made me that I kept in the desk drawer, my stubbornness. She'll know how to use it better than I ever did. I sat on the floor and laughed through my tears. He hadn't forgotten me. Not even in the tiniest details. Not even when Kareen was whispering in his ear every day. That kind of love doesn't get erased. The next spring, I turned the cabin into a writing retreat. Nothing fancy. Just a warm, lived-in space where people can come to work on whatever they need to. Memoirs, letters, stories they were too afraid to tell. I host them once a month. No fee. Just community, quiet, and conversation. At the front door, I placed a small wooden sign. This space is protected by truth. Please leave yours at the door. Every so often, I dream about him. We're usually in the garden. He's wearing that green sweater, humming under his breath. Sometimes he speaks. Sometimes he just smiles, and I wake up feeling full instead of empty. People often ask me if I'd do it all again. Go through the court, the fight, the betrayal, the press, the grief. And the answer is yes. 1,000 times yes, because the truth matters. And love, the kind that sees you even when others try to bury you, that's worth fighting for. The world never knew the real John Harper, but I did. And now, thanks to that fight, so will anyone who walks through the door of his cabin and reads the words etched into the table where he used to write, "For Eliza, always." And for the first time, I finally believe it.